Olha o contra-ataque aí. Vem que vem o time avançando rápido pela meio de campo. Bola dominada no pé do camisa 10. Ele vai pra cima, passou pelo primeiro, passou pelo segundo. E bateu a grande área, vai chutar. Bateu, é gol! Que golaço, minha gente!
A experiência de futebol mais autêntica já criada para os games. Junte-se no 5v5 Rush, a nova maneira de jogar com os amigos e leve seu clube para a vitória. EA Sports FC 25. Dê tudo pelo clube. Já disponível.
Não é tempo técnico, mas é intervalo aqui no podcast. Já imaginou se seu time tivesse um seguro para não perder nunca? Pois é, isso não existe. Mas com a Zurich Seguros, quem não perde nunca é você. Na Zurich Seguros, os planos se adequam às suas necessidades em qualquer momento da sua vida. Seja seguro de auto, residência, vida e muito mais. Diferente de alguns times, na Zurich Seguros você pode confiar. Para saber mais, acesse zurich.com.br ou consulte seu corretor.
The following is an exclusive presentation of News Radio KMAN, your home for K-State athletics. It's game time. This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
You ever have that moment when somebody tells you about a TV show you should watch and tells you the premise and all that, and you're like, I don't know if that's exactly going to be my thing, but then that person is like, you're going to sit down and watch this, and so you do, and it turns out the show's just an absolute banger and you can't stop watching it. My problem is I started the show right in the middle of football season. So now I have two battles in my life. Prepping for football and watching a TV show. That TV show is Yellow Jackets. AJ, have you heard of the show Yellow Jackets before?
I have not heard the show Yellow Jackets before.
It's on Showtime. It's about a soccer team, high school soccer team, girls soccer team in the 90s that was flying out to Seattle for a national tournament. They end up getting in a plane crash somewhere in like Canada or something, and they're stranded. But the show goes back and forth from them in the woods, stranded, to them today as adults. And so there's two stories going on at once. And they show you little flashbacks as well to like things that show up in the future that tells you the story is going to be off the rails at some point if the plane crash isn't enough.
I recognize none of these actors.
Well, you'll recognize some of them. Well, maybe okay, you may be too young, but like Juliette Lewis, I remember her from Dusk Till Dawn.
I recognize her.
The Quentin Tarantino movie. Christina Ricci.
Yes.
I just watched Casper the other day, and she was probably a teenager at that point. The rest of them I don't really know besides Melanie Linsky. She was on 2.5 Men. She was the guy that lived below the guys, always hitting on Charlie. But anyway, it's a really good show. If you're really into like the like any sort of murder mysteries, documentaries, the thrillers, the psychological dramas, survival shows, like that kind of hit that it checks a lot. It checks a lot of boxes, and I'm only 5 episodes in, and I'm kind of dying to watch the rest of them, and there's only 2 seasons. There's supposed to be a 3rd season coming up in 2025, and I don't have Showtime, but if you have Netflix, you can watch it on Netflix. Welcome to the game. Mitch Fortner with AJ Shaw. No Troy today. He's out sick, but he has sent in his Mitch in Vegas picks, and Mitch in Vegas Week 8 coming up at 5:25. You can get your votes in now. Go to Mitch the Fort on Twitter, or you can go to the Game KMAN or 1350 KMAN on Twitter and vote for the games. You represent the people. AJ had the big week last week, but we'll make our predictions coming up at 5:25. At 5:10, we'll be joined by former K-State wide receiver Curry Sexton. We'll also preview the West Virginia Mountaineers later on in this hour with Keenan Cummings. He's from WVSports.com. He's our go-to West Virginia guy. He'll help us take a look at the West Virginia Mountaineers, which is a 6:30 kickoff in Morgantown. Power Cat Game Day, 2:30 in the afternoon, coming up this Saturday with myself, along with Tim Everson, Mason Voth. Zach Nemechek not going to be able to join us this week. He's in Hawaii. So Zach enjoying his time in the 50th state.
Lucky him.
And but he'll be joining us for the following week for the KU game. I wanted to lead off let's just talk about the Big 12 and the Big 12 picture right now. The landscape. We're a third of the way through. Everybody is halfway done with their regular seasons. I'm going to open up with a question. Here's a little trivia question for everybody as we open up here. So, of course, 16 teams now in the Big 12. Of those predicted to finish in the top 8, because it's evenly divided right now. Teams that are 3-0 or 2-1, and then teams that are 1-2 and 0-3. It is evenly divided top to bottom. 8 of the teams have the winning records, 8 of the teams have the losing records. But in the preseason poll, of the 8 teams predicted to finish in the top half, how many are currently in the top half of the Big 12? Through 3 games.
Oh, boy. I'm going to say 4 teams.
4 teams. Give everybody else a chance to think about this again. The question is, of the 8 teams projected to finish in the top half of the Big 12, who are of those 8 currently in the top half of the Big 12? The correct answer is 3. K-State, Iowa State, and K-State's opponent this Saturday in Morgantown, the West Virginia Mountaineers. No, not Arizona, not Oklahoma State, not KU, not even Utah. We've only played 3 games in the conference, and this is already a big surprise in the Big 12 standings. It's another one of those, at least it feels like. It's your typical Big 12 season, but it's also not your typical Big 12 season. Because even though right now we have 3 undefeated teams in the conference, and 2 of them are undefeated overall at 6-0, there's no by far and away the best team in the conference, in my opinion. Power rankings will say Iowa State, and that's fine. They're the 9th ranked team in the nation. Nobody's that killer. Nobody's that target on their back team right now. Some have started better than others. My feeling of the Big 12 right now is that BYU and Iowa State, they're just the more balanced teams right now. Everybody else have their flaws. They're better, way better in some areas than others. Iowa State and BYU have just been those 2 more balanced teams to get them to 6-0. There are some that are just better than others at figuring out how to win games. And to me, that's one of the major differences between the 2-1s and the 1-2 and 0-3s and the 3-0s. There are some that are just clearly better, and they're better at winning games. Now, heck, I think you could argue if K-State the secondary was doing a better job, maybe the passing game got going a little bit quicker. I'm not saying that changes the difference in the game against BYU, but I think you would definitely consider K-State to be the best team in the Big 12, with the exception of BYU, who's currently 6-0. Everybody's schedules are, of course, different. But I wanted to take a look at the chances of winning out. Because what I don't like seeing is, of course, BYU, K-State falling victim to the Cougars. They're 6-0. Iowa State 6-0. And quite honestly, one of these teams has a better schedule coming up to win out than the other. And I don't like it because it's Iowa State. But in the same, looking at it this way as well, at least K-State plays Iowa State. If you like the Kelly Ford rankings and the projections on all that, Kelly Ford right now gives Iowa State a 12% chance of winning out. They give K-State an 8% chance. And they give BYU a 6% chance. But Iowa State's schedule right now is pretty favorable, with one exception. Of course, when they play Farmageddon, Iowa State loves to have that game this year in Ames. There's no doubt about that. But they have UCF at home, then a bye week. Then they'll play 5 straight. They host Tech, which Texas Tech is the other undefeated in the Big 12. I think Iowa State's the better team. Texas Tech does not have a very good defense. Their offense is doing pretty well. Here's another common thing about Iowa State and BYU that's not talked about enough. What their defense is doing well, interceptions. Literally, there is twice the chance of you as an opposing quarterback throwing an interception than throwing a passing touchdown against those two defenses. They're just better at getting off the field. But the rest for Iowa State is at KU, home game against Cincinnati, at Utah, and then K-State. Big factor there is that they only have 2 road games left. They're going to Arrowhead Stadium and then at Utah. Utah will not have Cam Rising for the rest of the year. They're going to have a true freshman quarterback. They're going to be hosting K-State. They're hosting Texas Tech. They're hosting UCF. That is just a better schedule to run out the clock and go undefeated in the conference than BYU, I think. With of course, the exception of K-State, which, what does that tell you? That K-State-Iowa State game, more than likely, is going to be a monster game. Humongous game for both teams. Because the winner, if K-State can go into Ames without another loss, the winner of that game is going to the Big 12 championship game, most likely. Because Iowa State, BYU don't play each other, and K-State lost to BYU. BYU schedule, they will have an extra home game, but it's even though a 6% chance of winning out, it's just hard to win out in this conference. We all know that. We figure these teams are going to slip up at some point. It's just hard to tell where is that going to be. BYU is going to be hosting Oklahoma State on Friday. It feels like Oklahoma State's cooked. There's whispers out there that Alan Bowman is not going to start on Friday tomorrow night. It's going to be Garrett Rangel. I would imagine Rangel's not going to be the answer to their problems. They go to UCF. I'm done on UCF. I think they're cooked. They're going to Utah. Again, no Cam Rising. The crowd is going to have to get it done in Salt Lake City. Then they're going to host KU. They're at Arizona State, and then they host Houston. That Arizona State game, to me, is the best chance for BYU to lose. K-State has an 8% chance of winning out. I think that helps paint a picture on exactly how big every game is for K-State the rest of the way, considering not only the Big 12 championship game, but the college football playoff. It depends what happens, but it's not that big of a depends, if you know what I mean. Because K-State in the Big 12, once you've lost that game, that loss is more costly than it is in the Big 10 and the SEC. So K-State has their one loss. If they lose again, they have got to win the Big 12 championship to go to the college football playoff. That's just the way it is.
And it's going to be tough to try to bounce back, especially with all the teams ahead of you in that situation, too, if you lose that second game.
It's just so hard to tell where is BYU and where is Iowa State going to slip up. Because Iowa State is going to be a favorite the rest of the season.
Yes.
At least the way it's projected right now, they're a favorite for every game the rest of the way. I would assume BYU would be a favorite until they play at Arizona State. But here's the kicker. BYU beat you. So you need BYU to lose twice to get past them and get into the Big 12 championship game. I think Texas Tech, as the other undefeated in the Big 12, is the most vulnerable to lose a couple of games. I'm not too worried about them. And I think it's quite clear K-State is the best team of the 2-1s. K-State has already beaten Colorado. Arizona State, K-State will play. Cincinnati, K-State will play. Both of those games are at home. And then they're going to play West Virginia. So K-State can just take care of business right there and only have to worry about Iowa State. Now, I would imagine most K-State fans are like me, and you do like K-State's chances to win the next 5 and go into Ames, Iowa as a 10-1 team, but that, of course, that's not guaranteed. You never know what will happen. But right now, K-State is going to be the favorite for those 5 games before Iowa State comes up.
They should beat West Virginia. They should at least. Mm-hmm. They should beat KU. They definitely should beat Houston. Cincinnati, they should beat. Arizona State, I think they're going to be favored, like you said. It's going to be interesting, though, because Arizona State's not going to be a slouch, even though they're coming to Manhattan. And there's a game I'm missing in there, I think, right?
Iowa State, West Virginia, Cincinnati. Did you mention Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mentioned Cincinnati. Is there a game in between Cincinnati and Arizona State?
No, and this second half of K-State's schedule has become tougher than what it was at the beginning of the season. I mean, Cam Scattaboo's maybe now one of the most underrated players in not just the Big 12, but college football. He really is the pulse of Arizona State's offense, and also Sam Leavitt he's injured. He's not going to play this weekend, so what does that mean for the Sun Devils? Is it just this week, or is it moving on the rest of the year? In Cincinnati, with oh gosh, now I'm blanking on their quarterback's name, but anyway, I think he's been one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football. Brendan Sorsby, there we go. And then Xavier Henderson, his wide receiver, nearly has 500 yards on the year. It's been one of the best connections in college football. Maybe I shouldn't go that far, but at least the Big 12. They do a good job of taking care of the football, but everybody has kind of their flaws this year. But what's been very encouraging, that is K-State is doing a better job of not allowing the same mistake to really bite them. And I think we saw that at the end of the Colorado game. There was a big comparison to the K-State game against Colorado and against BYU, where there was a major turnover that led to the home team taking the lead, and the place just went absolutely nuts. But we saw two different reactions from K-State. Yes, it was at different times in the game, but I think it adds to how impressive it was for K-State against Colorado because the pressure was way more stacked than it was in the second quarter, late in the second against BYU. K-State responds with a back-to-back interceptions, the punt return for a touchdown. It was absolute chaos. The response against Colorado was they scored in 3 plays, and they won the game with the defense making a stop and not allowing Colorado, which, by the way, there was a ton of time left on the clock. I think I can speak for most of us where we saw, great, they scored a touchdown, but it's hard to enjoy because there's 2 minutes plus left on the clock. Shadur Sanders is their quarterback, and they have scored in less time in this game already.
Yeah, and with the way he was throwing the football all night, the way he was with his accuracy, you had a feeling, he's going to go down the field and beat you. Fortunately, he doesn't. But if you look at the Big 12, and you make a good point, with Tech, outside of Taj Brooks, they really haven't wowed me.
Well, they're not good on defense.
They're not good on defense, which is not surprising. It's Texas Tech. They've never been good on defense.
But everybody, we're all still surprised. BYU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech being the lone 3 undefeated in the conference this early is quite surprising.
Shows you how much parity there is in the conference, too.
Well, and I wasn't too high on Texas Tech, but I'll give them their due. They've done a good job of figuring out how to win games. They've been close Big 12 games, and they've won them all. Mm-hmm. Pretty impressive.
For sure.
So, I guess long story short, yes, K-State does not have control of their own destiny.
It'd be nice to have control of it, like you did in 22.
You really want BYU and Iowa State to slip up at some point. It's just hard to tell. You have your ideas, but it's hard to tell if that'll happen. But it's Big 12 football. Typically, these slip-ups happen when you least expect them.
Yep. Absolutely. You're 100% right when you say that.
So this game is big on Saturday. West Virginia's Neil Brown needs a win. Really, really, really needs a win.
I'm sure you saw it, but they have one win against a top 25 team, I believe, since he's gotten there, right?
I don't know that for sure. What I can tell you is that West Virginia has lost 8 consecutive games against a ranked opponent.
Yeah, last time they beat a ranked team, K-State in 2019.
Yeah, that sucked because K-State was the better team. That was in Manhattan. Oh, I remember that. I was working for ESPN that night. They were having me do stats. And, that was brutal.
That was pre-PA days?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. I didn't take over football until 21.
Gotcha.
Let's take a timeout. And still to come, Mitch in Vegas, we're going to have a special guest in studio. He happens to work here. But there is a tie between this guest and West Virginia. We'll hear from Curry Sexton at 5:10. We'll hear from the coordinators once in each hour. When we come back, we take a look at West Virginia with Keenan Cummings next on The Game.
This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
be joined by Keenan Cummings from WVSports.com in just a moment. I was just taking a look during the break at Texas Tech's remaining schedule. They should win their next two against Baylor and TCU. But then they go to Iowa State, so they'll knock one of the two, down a spot, enhancing K-State's chances, of course. But, actually, root for either one, I guess, but K-State doesn't play against Texas Tech, so. But I would after Iowa State, though, okay, Texas Tech plays Colorado. That's a home game. That could be a long night. That could be a high-scoring game. Gosh, that could be 40-something to 40-something. At Oklahoma State, who knows if Oklahoma State will ever wake up, and then they host West Virginia. So, just any given day, West Virginia can be good, or they could be, if you're a West Virginia fan, making you want to pull your hair out. The Mountaineers are 3-3. Their losses are to undefeated teams. They're all 6-0. All their opponents are undefeated. But still to come in hour number 2, we'll hear from defensive coordinator Joe Klanderman for the Cats, Mitch in Vegas with a special guest, Curry Sexton at 5:10. Conor Riley will hear in just a few moments, but let's check in with one of our good friends on the show. He's our West Virginia guy. Keenan Cummings from WVSports.com now joins us on the game. Keenan, really appreciate your time. Let's open up by talking about six-year head coach Neil Brown, who faced criticism on Monday, right? First of all, losing the game to Iowa State, but then a couple of days later, talking about how a frustrated fan base still urging them to come to the games because he thinks they're having a good time. That made a lot of fans upset. Right now, what is the feeling of West Virginia fans right now with Neil Brown in his 6 years of not a whole lot of success?
Yeah, it's frustrating. This is a proud fan base. They're used to winning. They expect to win. And it really just hasn't happened over the last 6 years. You can look at a lot of different things, and I think some of that was taken out of context, what Neil said. I knew what he was trying to say. It's the way it came across. And I think that's what bothered people so much. He wasn't necessarily saying, winning doesn't matter. We're here for entertainment. And that's the way it's kind of been phrased in a sense. But I think that what gets people is, West Virginia has had chances, multiple opportunities to win some of these ranked games. They're 3-16 under Neil Brown in ranked games. And all three of those wins, none of those teams finished the season ranked. So you can point to, miscues, penalties, things that didn't happen for you. But after a while, it really isn't necessarily the message, it's the messenger. And people want to see results. And, as I mentioned earlier, this is a proud program. And we're to the point where, people are really frustrated with the product on the field. They cannot get it done in these games against good teams.
Well, right now, West Virginia is 3-3, and just watching from afar, Keenan, I can tell it's been an emotional roller coaster. Big comeback win against KU. You blow out Oklahoma State in Stillwater after they got blown out in Manhattan by K-State. The losses are all to undefeated teams. So has there been common denominators about the 3 wins or the 3 losses?
It's weird. This season's been wild. If you would have told me at the start of the season, what's West Virginia's record? I would have said 4-2. I would have said that they would have won that Pitt game, which they were up 10 in the final 5 minutes and blew it. I would have said they would have lost at Oklahoma State. And this has not turned out anyway that I expected. It's been kind of nuts. Yeah, and really, it's hard to look at a fabric. I feel like each game has been kind of uniquely different. They didn't show up at all against Penn State. They played awful football. Now, Penn State's a very good football team, don't get me wrong, but they played bad, played much better against Pitt, had a chance to win that game, couldn't get it done, pulled the reverse on Kansas. They were down 11 with 5 minutes left, came back and beat them, beat the brakes off Oklahoma State, and then just same thing at home against Iowa State, just struggled. Had chances to win that game, chances to seize momentum. I think if you could point to one thing in the losses, outside of Penn State, that kind of is on its own island. They just didn't play well, and Penn State's a good team. But you look at the losses to Pitt and Iowa State, there were multiple chances to seize momentum and kind of put those games away in a sense, or at least give yourself a better chance to win it, and they couldn't do it. And that stems back to some of the frustration that the fan base has as a whole, because it's been different cast of characters, it's been different players, it's been different teams, and some of these same issues keep cropping up 6 years later.
All right, Keenan, offensively for West Virginia, I've been high on this rushing attack since the beginning of the season with Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson, and, of course, quarterback Garrett Green. That'll be a big test for K-State to stop the quarterback run in this one. They're all approaching 400 yards rushing. To me, it's a three-headed monster. Are they living up to this year's expectations through 6 games?
Yeah, for the most part, they've ran the ball very well. I think they struggled a little against Iowa State last week, but, Garrett was running well. They did a good job against West Virginia's running backs. They obviously it's tough to run on them, and I think it's going to be a challenge for West Virginia this week as well against Kansas State. Very, very tough to run on them. But they've performed well. They use Garrett a lot in the run game. In design stuff, he does a lot of stuff with scrambling. They have read stuff. Both running backs have played well. Jaheim White has played much better the last couple weeks. He started the season a little bit slow, but C.J. Donaldson looks like the guy that he was early in his career. Definitely running hard, breaking tackles, and that's something you're seeing out of them that you didn't really see a lot of times last year is breaking some of those tackles. So I think it's going to be kind of a strength on strength in this game on both sides, really. Both these teams want to run the football, and both these teams are pretty good at stopping the run.
How well is Garrett throwing the ball this year?
Mixed bag. At times it's looked really good. At times it hasn't. And I think that's kind of what he is at this point. The talk of the offseason was they worked on his mechanics, tried to fix it, and it has gotten better. Don't get me wrong, it has been better. But I think he's just going to be around the 57, 60% completion rate at best type guy. And that's okay, with what he can do with his legs and other things. But he's missed some deep balls that he hit last year. He has gotten a little bit better in the intermediate. At times he forces things. That's when he gets in trouble. He did that early in his career. A game against Kansas State, actually, in 2022, I remember he had a couple bad throws where he really forced things. After that, he's really taken good care of the football for the most part. Last year, he had 4 interceptions the entire season. Now, he's already surpassed that this year, but some of that is him trying to make a play, and I think he's got to kind of play in the framework of the offense and kind of do what he does best. And as long as he does that, West Virginia's offense moves the ball pretty well.
All right, let's move over to the defense. Keenan, got a couple of questions there. One, in Big 12 play, West Virginia's defense, when you crunch the numbers, maybe middle of the pack when you separate the rushing and the passing, you bring them together, and right now it's third best in total yards allowed in Big 12 play. I was reading one of your articles on WVSports.com, and it was about a number of injuries with Aubrey Burks, who's a starter, T.J. Jackson, a defensive end, and T.J. Crandall, who's a defensive back, who are dealing with injuries and maybe questionable for the game Saturday. How big of a deal would it be to lose those guys?
I think definitely Jackson has played it very, very well. Burks has been he's one of West Virginia's best defensive players, but I think he's only played one full game this entire year. He's really dealt with a lot of lingering injuries, had a lot of issues. It's kind of kept him off the field, but they're no questionably better when he's out there playing. But Jackson's kind of already filling in for Eddie Vesterinen, who got hurt early in the year in the FCS game. So he's been playing really well. He's their best pass rusher. I think if he isn't able to play, it definitely hurts them. But that's one area where West Virginia's done a really good job developing talent up front. They got some young guys, Asani Redwood, Hammond Russell, that they feel pretty good about, but you never want one of your best pass rushers off the field.
What is the strength, the weakness, and the best player for the West Virginia defense?
The strength, they stop the run well. They've had a few breakdowns at times, but teams have really struggled to run on them for the most part. The only exception to that was Kansas, but that was a little bit more with what West Virginia did. They kind of showed a light box. They didn't want Kansas making plays down the field, wanted to make them earn it. And I think that it's a strategy that obviously paid off. Weakness has been pass defense. It has gotten better, though. They had one bust last week that really kind of skewed their passing numbers. They got the call, one side got one call, the other side got the other, and it was just a wide-open 60-yard touchdown pass. But, I know you can't take that off the board, but if you take that off the board, the last 2 weeks against Oklahoma State and Iowa State, they've played much better in the secondary and, at that second level with their drops and getting to where they need to be in zone defense. So that is improving. Probably the best player I would say on West Virginia's defense right now is Josiah Trotter. He's played really, really well as a redshirt freshman. He is the son of Jeremiah Trotter and has really lived up to the billing. You know, he leads the team in tackles. He gets better every week. He has a chance to be a really, really good player in a few years, and you're already kind of seeing that, come to fruition here early in his career.
Keenan, I've noticed this is the homecoming game for West Virginia. Does the University of the Mountaineers do anything special for homecoming?
They have like the homecoming band and a couple things like that, but it kind of is what it is. I think anymore that with everything that goes on game day, it's not necessarily as big of a deal as it used to be. It was funny, you mentioned that this week. Neil Brown was asked if there was any added pressure, because this was the homecoming game, and he basically just said, "I didn't even know it was the homecoming game." So I think that's kind of where we're at. But it'll be a fun environment for any Kansas State fan that's coming to make the trip. Should be pretty good weather again. It was great at weather last week. Kind of hoping for the same. This time of year in October in West Virginia, you can go from wearing shorts to wearing a sweater in the same day. So
yeah, night games in Morgantown are always fun. Had plenty of them over the last decade. Keenan, really appreciate your time. Good work at WVSports.com, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's always awesome to have Keenan Cummings on again from WVSports.com. Does an excellent job there. That's their rival site for West Virginia coverage. Let's go ahead and take another timeout. The 3-3 Mountaineers, who are 2-1 in Big 12 play, hosting 5-1 K-State, the 17th ranked team in the nation, who are 2-1 in Big 12 play as well. That's a 6:30 kickoff in Morgantown, and pregame coverage. The biggest pregame show in the Big 12. Power K Game Day starts at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. Curry Sexton coming up at 5:10 when we come back. Offensive keys for against West Virginia. We'll hear from OC Conor Riley next.
Your home for K-State sports.
Line. Is in. Touchdown, Kansas State in 4 overtime.
This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
If you want to vote on Mitch in Vegas, you have to have Twitter. At Mitch the Fort is my account. The show account, at The Game KMAN. We always post links to our shows just in case if you miss anything. And also at 1350 KMAN. Any one of those accounts you can go vote for Mitch in Vegas. You are a part of the people. The people get to vote. You're a part of the standings. And we'll pick our games coming up at 5:25. Troy is out today. We'll have a special guest, though, in studios, a guest picker that has a tie to a West Virginia tradition. We'll put it that way.
Boy, the show had a good week last week, didn't he?
Well, we'll talk about it later. Have a cup of decaf, chill out. That's 1 week. You had 1 week.
But he had a good week last week.
We'll hear from Curry Sexton coming up at 5:10. I always like to hear from the coordinators on Thursday. Let's start with the offensive side. Conor Riley speaking to the media just a couple of hours ago, previewing the game against West Virginia, and of course had some questions about the big game from DJ Giddens.
How easy does DJ Giddens make your play calling?
Pretty easy in those situations. Obviously, DJ had a phenomenal evening that night running the football. I think we looked and he had 11 forced missed tackles in one game, which is pretty dynamic. And it was pretty clear that, early on we had to continue to feed him the football. And then when you go through a situation when Taquan came in and just kind of easing him into that moment, when you have that tailback in the backfield, it certainly makes it a lot easier. It certainly does.
You've seen him make some defenders miss pretty bad the last 2 weeks in the open field. When did you first notice that he was gaining that ability?
I think anytime, we've known for a long time DJ has a tremendous amount of ability. And just like any other football player, as you get more and more repetitions, one of the things that I'm so impressed with, always known he'd been able to run through an arm tackle. He's a very physical runner. There's one particular play where we ran a power play and the flat-footed safety was right down in the hole. And for him to make guys miss in the hole like he's making the miss in the hole, he just continues to improve on those things. You can go back to a year ago, and a year ago I know when we had challenged him pretty significantly going into the Central Florida game is really, I believe, where he began to gain more and more confidence, and it's just been building ever since.
At least it seems like wants to do a little bit more too high safety looks and I guess to take away the deep pass or take away some of those deep plays.
Yeah, they're gonna run a little bit more of zone coverage than what we saw this previous week, and I think 99% of the country is going to show a little bit more zone coverage than what we saw this previous week. So we're going to be prepared for both. They are very active up front. They have always been very active up front, and I credit their head football coach. I credit their defensive coordinator and their defensive staff and their ability to do some things up front that are going to create the pressures where they don't necessarily feel all the time that they need to bring that fifth, sixth rusher. But we ultimately need to be prepared to adapt and adjust no differently than we did this past Saturday night.
That's Conor Riley. Just got about a couple of minutes in there from his press conference earlier today. I was looking at some of my PowerCat Game Day notes I was putting together earlier today, and one I'm now going to add because I was just curious. I looked something up here real quick. We all remember Ollie Gordon last year for Oklahoma State was just out of this world good, really starting with the K-State game, and he was the best running back in college football last year. I just noticed DJ Giddens has 402 more rushing yards than Ollie Gordon. DJ has only carried the ball 7 more times. Listen, I don't know if you're as just blown away by that as I am. That's pretty crazy. And Oklahoma State was supposed to have a really good offensive line. And I still think they're pretty good. They're pretty good in their pass protection. Anyway, DJ is out of this world good. The most underrated player in college football, starting to get some of that national attention. All right. Some quick keys for the offense against West Virginia. Number one is actually about a particular player from West Virginia. That's TJ Jackson. If you take away the last couple of games, TJ was on an all-American run as a defensive lineman. But he is the Big 12 leader in tackles for loss. He has 9.5. He has 4 sacks this year. But here's the key. The question is he in or is he out? He's banged up. He is questionable for this game against K-State. So that's a pretty big key. I mean, I know the media that's going to Morgantown, that's probably the first thing they're going to look down on the field and see is TJ Jackson warming up for West Virginia. Of course, K-State wants to have success in the run game. Only 2 times this year has West Virginia given up a 100-yard rusher. Nick Singleton for Penn State, that was just an overall bad game for West Virginia, their first game. He had 9 yards per carry. The other one was Devin Neal of Kansas. 110 yards on 27 carries, only had 4 yards per carry. West Virginia allowing a second best in the Big 12, 3.5 yards per carry in Big 12 play. K-State is the best in the Big 12. If West Virginia is going to go balls to the wall to sell out against your run game, make them pay in the passing game. The Mountaineers have had a rough start defending the pass. They are getting better right now, 7th best in the Big 12 at stopping the pass. But can Jace Brown go 3 straight games with a big game? If he does that, and I see that consistency, that for me will put Jace Brown on another level. More of the household name. Exactly what K-State is needing now. One wide receiver that is consistently putting up some big numbers. 200 yards the last 2 games, 20 yards per catch over the last 2 games is a big deal. But on top of that as well, K-State needs to pass protect. West Virginia with 10 sacks this year. They're going to bring the pressure. They're going to dial it up. Colorado had success dialing up some pressure against K-State. The Mountaineers saw that on film, and they're going to do that, I think, no doubt. And the other key real quick is 3rd down. K-State's numbers offensively on 3rd down are down from a year ago. K-State was pretty good last year on 3rd down, close to 50%. This year, K-State is about 37-38% on 3rd down, but here's the thing. K-State can make those numbers a little bit better this week because West Virginia is one of the worst teams on 3rd down defense that K-State will see this season. They are 108th in the nation in third down defense. Let's hope the Cats can make those big plays on third down and capitalize. All right, that's going to wrap up hour number 1. Hour number 2, we'll hear from defensive coordinator Joe Klanderman, Mitch in Vegas. But after, of course, a quick timeout and take a look at CBS News, we'll be joined once again. It's Thursday. Curry Sexton is next as you're listening to The Game on News Radio KMAN.